welcome back to the Trusted Podcast. In this episode, we welcome Gareth Davies, co-founder of Davies Marsh, a firm you're probably familiar with through their BDM benchmark report.
Gareth has carved out a reputation for helping businesses hire with confidence, and his resources have helped further this industry for the better.
Sit back, grab a cuppa, and get ready for the content.
And I know how things must seem.
Gareth,
Hello.
great to have you here.
Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No worries. It's your first ever podcast.
Yeah, it is. A little bit nervous on the way here, but no, it's good to be here. I'm pleased. I've said at the beginning I need to do more things to get out my comfort zone. So doing this is absolutely a good thing to do.
We definitely are not professionals, so I think if we could say anything, relax, take your time.
Yeah.
We can edit out all of the bits that you don't want. So yeah, we're really, really grateful to have you in.
Cool. No, lovely. Thank you.
And it's been a really busy few months for you. The BDM benchmark report has just come out. Little plug for you, and we will attach it to the link in the description.
Yeah, that'd be great.
How have things been, and what is that process like, I guess?
So the BDM benchmark report is, as you know, because I've sent you guys a copy, but I think I came up with the idea when I was working at my previous company, BWD, and it was something that I wanted to reach out to financial advisors about, specifically about providers and about BDMs. And a lot of it was kind of, okay, well, it might appear, obvious, but there was no kind of factual information that I was aware of that was out there. So we, at the time, because we recruited financial advisors, we were able to relatively quickly put a questionnaire together to send it out to financial advisors, just ask them a series of questions and then compile the information and produce a report. So I was kind of testing the market to see whether or not people would like this, and it kind of just took off. It was amazing. I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to do it as a business development tool and to kind of get business on the back of it. But it kind of just grew and grew from there. And then that was probably about 7 or 8 years ago when I first started it. And then when I set up Davies Marsh 2.5 years ago, I continued it, called it something slightly different, revamped it a little bit. But it's just been a brilliant way for me to almost reinvent myself in the market as Gareth Davies from Davies Marsh, not Gareth Davies from BWD. So I'm really pleased it's gone down well.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, for us to see so many of the trusted community feature on it is brilliant. And I think just to see the overall support for it, because if you look at distribution as a whole, there probably aren't as many accolades to reward effectiveness as there are, say, in the industry that we service on the advice side of things. There are lots of awards, lots of recognition, but on the sales side, it doesn't feel like there is as much. So to be able to contribute to yours in a meaningful way, it's proper feedback from people that we work with. It's a great accolade to have on your CV.
Yeah, I think so, and it's great. I mean, what you guys have done as well, because you were mentioned, as you know, on the report. You received multiple nominations, and that's when I first got the report going back a few years, and I sort of took a screenshot of that. The one page on the report, which people like yourselves were mentioned, and got the nominations from financial advisors, and I put that on, and it just took off. I got like 20,000 impressions in the first kind of few hours almost, and it was just like I'm onto something here. It is, and you're right, because I think with financial advisors, there's a lot of awards for the best advisors, the best financial advice, and so on and so forth, but very, very little that I was aware of on the BDM side. Because let's be honest, BDMs are the engine room of product providers. Without them, it's like a leaking bucket, isn't it? Especially with consolidation, and there's nothing that's going to go into the top of it unless you guys are out there doing, what you do. So it's all credit to you. But no, like I said, I'm just really, really pleased that it's gone down as well as it has done. So I'll continue to do them until people tell me to stop.
Yeah, that's it. And it doesn't surprise me one bit, to be fair, that you are showing off BDMs in our industry and they want to show it off themselves. Salespeople naturally want to do that, and that's a good thing. Get their brand out there. I think Marcus has been involved 3 years out of 3. He's off camera today. So me and Will are chasing him, every year. Yeah. But we'll knock him off the top spot one day.
Good stuff. Good luck.
So we've jumped ahead a bit, I guess, with the BDM benchmark report. Tell us more about you and your history and how you ended up in the recruitment of BDMs.
Yeah, good question. So a little bit about myself. So I'm I'm from Wrexham originally, so I was there for 18, 19 years. Still have family there. Went to Sheffield Hallam Uni for the best part of 4 years, then went to work for Aon as like a pensions administrator. Did that for 2-3 years. And then I got a phone call from a recruiter who had a job with, I think it was Mercer at the time, obviously they've rebranded since, to say, well, there's a job going kind of similar to what you're doing at the moment. And I said, well, actually, I don't really like doing what I'm doing. It's not really for me. Have you got any jobs where you're going? And she introduced me to her boss, and I ended up getting a job there in recruitment. And I didn't know a huge amount about recruitment. I just heard you could, earn lots of money, which is a bit of a myth. I think you can do all right. But it was, a lot better than I was earning at the time, and it sounded a bit more exciting. So I was with that company for about 3 years, and then went self-employed for a couple of years, and then myself and 2 colleagues set up BWD, and we were there for 17 years. And then, I reached a point in my life where I just thought, actually, it kind of now feels like I want to do it on my own. I had certain things that I wanted to do. And I thought, right, okay, well, now's the time to do it. So, that was 2.5 years ago when I set up Davies Marsh with my wife. So we're technically business partners, but yeah.
And life partners.
Yes, yeah. So that's the business side. And yeah, always specialised in sales and distribution recruitment for the last 25 years. And outside of work, 3 children, Emily, Harry and Benji, and we've got a dog. And again, classic midlife crisis. I've started doing triathlons.
Giving up golf and taking up triathlons.
Yeah. So I do that, and I do really enjoy it. I enjoy the discipline of having to get up in the morning and just go out and go for a run or go for an open water swim or something like that. And it's just once a year. It just keeps me on my toes, I think.
Do you see a big crossover in the sense of your service in the sales community and product providers who typically will have a sales team? Do you see that there's an overlap between what you do and what they do? Because effectively you are in some way selling a service. Do you see that there's bits that you pick up from the people that you work with in terms of how they approach a sales strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you try. Yeah, I think you can draw quite strong parallels in the sense that when a BDM would go and talk to a financial advisor, it shouldn't always be about the product initially. It shouldn't be a product pushy. It should be more kind of consultative. And I think that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do the reports that I do. It's to try and be aware or be known as a sort of an expert, ideally, or a specialist within your field. So if you kind of pump out relevant material, then you're invariably going to get people that get in touch and say, okay, well, you seem to know what you're talking about. Let's have a conversation about a vacancy. But it's kind of an afterthought almost of you don't go in saying, right, well, I want to talk about vacancies, because forget it, everybody does that. And I think with BDMs, when you're going to talk to advisors, it's probably something similar. You might develop like a little report or something based on some legislative changes, and you might want to take something to an advisor and say, look, I know you operate within this space, just thought you might find this useful, and then hopefully that might open up a conversation at some point further down the line. So yeah, there's little things that you do try and do to try and get ultimately get them to a position where they might trust you to give you some business at some point.
And you mentioned you've been in the distribution recruitment space for 25 years. How have you seen that profession, that area change over that time period, both just from the personnel and also really what people are trying to achieve?
Yeah. Again, really good question. I think when I first got into recruitment back in 2001, Aegon or Scottish Equitable back then, to give you an example, they had offices all over the UK. They were like 2 in Leeds, all the way down the M1, like Sheffield, Nottingham, Leicester, and they had about sort of 10 or something stupid in London, and they had hundreds of BDMs at the time, and they had a really good system whereby they would recruit graduates from university, train them up, become like trainee broker consultants as they were then, all the way through to being senior or executive. And that was great because there was always this kind of flow of fresh blood coming into the industry. The concern is now that there doesn't seem to be available at the moment, straight from university. It doesn't really happen. I think some companies in London will recruit, like support people from university also. I know obviously AJ Bell have been quite successful in doing that and then training them up and getting them up to the required level, but it doesn't happen anywhere near to the same scale that it used to. But I think, most recently, if you were to let's say the last 5 years of the changes within the marketplace for BDMs, I mean, consolidation is absolutely massive. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. It's rife at the moment. I do feel sorry for a lot of BDMs when you can kind of wake up one morning and realize that, one of your top accounts has just been snapped up, and invariably it's only a matter of time before the assets start to leave. You'd have also got the huge changes in legislative, circumstances. The governments that come in, they're going to kind of want to put their own spin on things. That's going to, create a degree of uncertainty. I know that John Prescott, when you were interviewing him, said actually it's not always a bad thing when you get advisors that want to reach out to you and have a conversation, because that can lead to further opportunity further down the line, which is great. And I also think that the industry does seem to be quite fleet-footed in that when there are changes afoot, then they will, bring some changes with the relevant products to be relevant for that point in time.
That's a good point. I think we've seen, obviously I've been in the industry nearing on 10 years, which is nothing compared to others, but it seems cyclical. This has happened before and it'll happen again. But I think on the point you made about this conveyor belt of talent, we sit here today, me and Will and Marcus and another co-founder of Trusted, all ex-AJ Bell, all came with that sort of school of hard knocks. I came through the apprenticeship, Will straight from college, Marcus straight from traveling. How do we change that? How do we get back to a point where we go to, where Scottish Equitable were, and we're bringing talent in young and really training people up to be the best of the best?
It feels like a missed opportunity in lots of ways because there's so much bright talent. And how many people do we know that go to uni and they have their eyes set on the big four going into accountancy and that kind of thing? But financial services on the sales side especially is so attractive. So I was going to ask exactly the same thing.
I think you're right. People tend to fall into the industry, don't they? I don't know what your circumstances were specifically, but, I don't think you go to university thinking one day I'm going to be a business development manager with a product provider, whereas you would do as an accountant or an investment manager, say.
I don't think we even knew it existed, really. Did you? Did you get offered Aon with it when it was AJ?
I got offered Aon, so that's something we share.
Right.
So that was a pension consultant's role. I don't know how different that would have been, and how different my life would have been now, but yeah, I guess that. So I studied business economics and financial services at college, A-levels. So I knew I wanted to be in financial services in some capacity. That always meant accountant from where I was from, So yeah, you're right. I wanted to be in this industry. AJ Bell were on my doorstep, so it worked out really well. And I got in with a platform pre-IPO, saw that sort of growth over the next 5 or 6 years. But you're right, it was never on purpose.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there are some companies that do it quite well. Again, AJ Bell as an example, where they will bring young talent in, train them up, and get them to become, very successful sales professionals. I think a lot of alternative investment companies do it quite well in London as well. Octopus Investments, Puma Investments, Foresight. They kind of have this structure whereby you've always got talent to dip into. It's almost like to use a football team analogy, you've got great academy players kind of coming through the ranks, and at some point they're going to be ready to take the next.
Alex Ferguson's United.
Yeah.
Having that youth team and class of 92 come through and they're the world champion. Treble winners.
Tell who he supports, can't you?
Did I tell him a Liverpool supporter?
I am as well, so it's 2 versus 1.
Fantastic.
Armchair Liverpool fan, I must add.
Now it's a good time to be a Liverpool supporter, I have to admit, after 30 years of hurt. But no, it's it's good that there are companies out there at the moment that do still do things like that, but I think more of it should be encouraged, because otherwise, you're at the mercy of what's available on the marketplace. I'm kind of doing myself a disservice here, because people will come to me invariably in a tight market and go, we've got a vacancy, can you help? But if you do, like I say, have a team of young talent there in as a telephone account manager, then it's great. You can just parachute them into a certain region. But again, geographically, that you're always going to be kind of at the mercy of where the opportunity is, because they tend to be in London, a lot of these roles.
I think it falls by the wayside because people can't afford the investment because it's such a competitive market space. People think, well, I'd love to train the next generation up, but I need someone in and I need someone working now. Do you think that's one of the contributors?
Yeah, completely. You know, the way that the market has kind of gone, you know, you look at timeline, you know, with regard to the rise of the passive investments and, you know, kind of the race to the bottom when it comes to the costs and platform and MPS and investments. You know, a lot of the time I'll get calls from clients, and they really do need people that can hit the ground running wherever possible. You know, it's the expectation that, okay, you'll get, let's say, 9 months grace, but they really want a return quite quickly after that, you know, to get to a run rate of whatever million per annum after that point. And if you don't, unfortunately, there's only going to be one way that it's going to go, which is unfortunate, but it's just the way of the world, you know, because I think there are fine margins on what, you know, in terms of the profitability and what the expectations are. So
we discussed it when we were having the discovery call about that crowded room that we're currently faced in. Whether it's real or metaphorical, the analogy still stands. And we talked about the importance of personal brand, and you've kind of mentioned how it's affected you personally, obviously, Gareth Davies, as the individual, the expert. Do you think that BDMs use personal brand to their advantage enough? And if not, what can they do to expand on that?
Yeah, again, really good question. And just very quickly, I know I'm not a business development manager, but you can kind of draw kind of parallels with my sort of background. When I needed to reinvent myself from 17 years with a sort of a 20-strong recruitment company to be basically being freelance at Davies Marsh, you know, I had to step out my comfort zone and do a lot more. I made the conscious decision that I was going to do more kind of video content, because the way that the world is now, I think people are more than happy to just watch a 30-second, 60-second clip of a video of an advert or some content that's relevant to them, as opposed to just looking through a job spec, or just copy and pasting it and put it on LinkedIn. You know, you can become quite kind of lazy at doing things like that, especially with ChatGPT. And people aren't stupid. They'll see it and go, okay, well, it reads quite well, but it will have taken him 10 seconds to basically do that and get it stuck online. So what I would just say to, you know, business development managers is just strive to be the best that you can be. And that means by being brave, you know, doing stuff that is positive, you know, being in a position to be positively uncomfortable, because you know that it's going to benefit you, but you will have to kind of just kind of dig deep and be courageous and do some of these things. And again, videos are one example. Not many people do it, but the ones that do it, I think, do stand out for the right reasons. You know, going along to networking events, you know, if you get the opportunity, maybe do a presentation on something. You know, for me, it would scare me to death, but, you know, it would be great if you can stand up and talk to 50 advisors, say, because at the end of it, they're going to come up and say, do you know what? Well done. You know, you're brave for doing that, and then hopefully get some business cards at the end of it. You know, also as well, I think, you know, something about maybe collecting testimonials. If you've done a really good job with an advisor, have a brag file with their permission, maybe put some of the things out onto LinkedIn. That's something that I'm conscious of doing, trying to stand out from the competition. You know, professional development, maybe get a mentor as well, see what the budget is for like professional qualifications, or if there isn't, do it off your own bat. You know, I think people should, not that it's a prerequisite I'm finding with my clients, but I do think it would stand you in good stead if you did have QCEF level 4, you know, that kind of empathy with advisors that do need it as part of their job, and maybe strive towards being chartered. And also as well, just try and be more of a partner, have a partnership approach with advisors. You know, that's what all the analysis seems to be, you know, screaming out. It's advisors want someone that can, you know, work really closely with, not just sell a solution and move on to the next one. And, you know, I think you can do that at any age, can't you? You know, whether or not you're 6 months into a role or you know, 6 years.
Getting yourself out there. And I was going to ask that. So you mentioned there being qualified for your clients, or you know, any provider that you sort of work with. Is there anything, are they conscious of more than just qualifications? Are they ever conscious about social media use or this new world that we see and sort of engagement elsewhere, or is that ever something they're looking for in a vacancy?
I don't know, not so much. Not so much. It all tends to be, again, whenever I do work with a client, I'll always say, okay, once you've taken the brief down in the mandate, what does good look like? What would you want this business development manager to do? How would you like them to operate? And I think it's just the basics still seem to be coming out all the time. Just be busy, make stuff happen. Fill up the diary. Just get the activity wheel turning. Go out and do breakfast meetings. See people. And I think they would be encouraged to a degree. To do things on LinkedIn. Obviously, you've got to be quite careful because I think, obviously just check to see what you can and what you can't do. Yeah. So, have an opinion, but it needs to be kind of an opinion and that will coincide with what your employer wants you to do. So yeah, I think, like I said, be brave and just go out and do stuff that you think is gonna work. I think with regards to the qualifications, less so. Maybe if you were to talk to some of the top asset managers, it might be a factor for them about professional qualifications. But invariably, or most of my clients don't say, right, they must be chartered or they must be QCEF level 4 these days. As long as they've got a black book of contacts that they can take with them and a good performance, history, then they're generally the top two.
And they're active and they're hopefully effective, and that's the role, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we saw two sides of the coin, really. We interviewed Justine Randall, who said, give me someone raw in terms of talent, but with the right values, versus Eduardo Repetto at Avantis, who said, I need the technical ability to go with that. And it's interesting to see that there's a sliding scale between the managers who, and again, I think it goes back to that point of wanting people to hit the ground running so you get the return on investment, because I loved Brian's take on it when he spoke about the MBA that he decided to undertake and how it helped him empathize with business owners and that kind of thing. But we probably don't see enough of people doing the qualifications for personal development as much as I hear other people, and we interviewed somebody else who referenced it as being a box ticking exercise. And it's really interesting to hear from your perspective that it's not always a prerequisite, but it might just be something additional that gets you noticed, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's just kind of separating yourself from the competition. And I know that John Prescott was saying that, there seems to be a lot of like average is accepted these days, and I think advisors don't want average. They want very good. Yeah, they want the best people to come and talk to them. Research shows that advisors will only deal with a certain select number of BDMs, and if you're part of that exclusive club, then of course the expectations are going to be a lot higher. But I think with regards to qualifications, it's just to be the best that you can be. So it's not kind of being qualified and then just trying to negotiate a pay rise with your boss or anything like that. But then the stats do show that people who are generally better qualified are paid a slightly higher amount than people who aren't. So there is an indirect benefit of doing it. But I think the confidence you would get by going in and talking to an advisor or a networking event saying, I'm chartered as well, or I've got QCEF level 4. It's kind of it might kind of lift you a little bit. In sort of thinking, well, actually, I do deserve to be here. I know what I'm talking about. I'm technically, better for it by having that qualification. So it's more from your perspective as a BDM as opposed to the providers.
And you mentioned about how advisors are looking for the best that they can get from the market in terms of the BDMs available to it. The report threw out some really interesting statistics. What is it that advisors are really looking for when you get under the bonnet of working with BDMs? You mentioned about the partnership stuff. If you could just expand a little bit more about what that looks like, that'd be brilliant.
On the partnership side, or just
in general, what advisors are looking for, really?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, before I came here, I had a look at the previous reports because we've always asked that question over the last sort of few years, and you always tend to get the same responses. So the number one is technical knowledge, and technical knowledge is I suppose you might think it's fairly basic, but as a business development manager, just knowing your solution inside and out, knowing the competition, knowing where the solution kind of fits in, what the USPs are, where it could possibly fall down, because when you are challenged, which inevitably you will be by an advisor, you kind of know what you're talking about. And if you don't know, you've got a contact within the business to sort of say, actually, can you come and help me with this one? And then rearrange a conversational, with the advisor for another day. I think another thing is understanding the advisor's business. That is, it sounds straightforward, but how can you really challenge? How can you really add value to an advisor unless you understand their business? And that's something that advisors say time and time again, that they really do rate the BDMs who do take the time to understand them fully. And support with clients, again, fairly basic, but being at the end of the telephone, being available at all times when there is an issue, and wanting to help, being able to kind of navigate your way through the internal systems with the providers to try and make sure that these cases are all sorted out. Business development ideas, again, that goes along hand in hand with an understanding of the company. Yeah. If you understand it, you're able to say, well, actually, we've got a new, product launch, or we've got new rates. Can we come and have a conversation with you? And then troubleshooting. Again, invariably things go wrong with advisors, and when things do go wrong, they want to speak to you and they want to get it sorted out as soon as they possibly can do. So being there to put things right is key.
And what trends do you generally see, and what trends would you expect? You talk about, I think this is your third benchmark report, sort of as we know it. If we then rewind the clock, is there anything that's changed in those categories, and what would you expect to maybe change in the next 3, 5, 10 years?
I think the way that the market is, the number of the BDMs has contracted quite a lot. So that would mean that advisors are going to have less BDMs that are going to come and talk to them. And also as well, I do think from a funding and financial perspective, it might be quite tempting for a provider to just have a team of telephone account managers down in London, say, and have, a handful of BDMs. So it's not going to be like it used to be. So I think the demands placed on BDMs will increase. But again, that's I don't think it's a bad thing, obviously, because, as I said, you're part of an exclusive club if you're one of half a dozen BDMs that the advisor sees and relies on. But then, kind of goes back to, are you the best version of yourself that you can be? Are you giving the best service to the advisor? But I think the way that it's going to evolve is that, with the whole post-lockdown environment, you could say that everything could be done virtually, which of course it can be, but there's still a real demand out there from advisors that they want the face-to-face contact. They want people to kind of come in and talk to them and do the hand-holding. So I suspect that's going to stay. It's as the numbers still kind of dwindle, then I think that's going to become more and more important with advisors.
It's really interesting. We see it all the time. For the people who are watching this, they'll know by now that I live in the Northwest and cover the Southwest. And with that, I do a lot more virtual where I can. And I think that as my own journey has progressed and the region's been more developed, I think the requirement for it has reduced. But there's almost that feeling of gratefulness that when you do make the extended effort, when you go the extra mile to go in and see someone. Lewis, he lives in the Northwest and looks after the Northwest, but still gets out and about, because it's really hard to substitute the Zoom setting for the personal stuff if you then want to touch on the points that you just mentioned there about understanding the business. You can build a stronger connection with someone when you meet them in person. You can go the extra mile and do the troubleshooting from a more empathetic standpoint when you are in person with them. So I think you're right that the face-to-face stuff doesn't feel like it's going away, even as technology gets better. And if anything, people are almost a bit Zoom called out and quite like the idea of having somebody that they can rely on who, is not a million miles away in terms of geography as well.
Yeah.
It is difficult though, isn't it? Because like you say, budgets are lower. So if you have less BDMs, but then advisors want you to spend more time on the road, it's sort of an equation that doesn't add up. It's really difficult to be able to spend that time out on the road when you are expected to be the troubleshooter and to be some sort of admin help and to help them with business ideas. But that's why the outstanding BDMs are outstanding, because they make time for everything, I guess.
It's hard. It's a really tricky balance to get right, isn't it? Because there are so many sort of facets of being a business development manager. You've got to be likable obviously, because if they don't, you could be the best BDM in the world. If they don't like you, they're not going to give you any business, I'd have thought. You've still got to achieve targets. We know all the evidence from advisors is that, it's that kind of partnership approach, but I can't remember the last time a head of distribution has given me a vacancy and said, look, Gareth, we really need a BDM who's going to create a partnership approach. Relationship with this, with the advisors is all about, they need to be able to raise the assets. And that is first and foremost, ultimately what they want from BDMs. But it's, like I say, it is quite hard to meet all the requirements. I mean, interestingly, just very quickly, I think that also the feedback that we've had on the BDM benchmark report is that franchise models do work really successfully, in the sense that if you've got like a hub or so many hubs around the UK, so let's say the Northwest, it wouldn't just be the field-based BDM, there might be a telephone account manager attached. There might, if there's a platform, there might be a platform adoption consultant, there might be client services, there might be support. So you've kind of got this wraparound level of all sort of multiple touch points that advisors can reach out to. So if you're not available, they've got 3-4 other people that they can pick up the phone to and speak to, and that tends to go down very, very well. However, it's obviously very, very expensive, and not every company can afford to do that.
You can count on one hand the providers that do that, and they pop into my head straight away as you say it. You can just think that I won't mention them.
We like it. That I like that route as well. I think that we've worked in that that type of structure, and actually, Brett Davidson, who works on the advice side about structuring businesses, talks about how you see those businesses with 10 advisors and very few support staff, and then effectively you have the front-facing, similar, there's an analogy, I suppose, with the sales side of things, the front-facing people who are doing the kind of the new business side of things, doing administrative stuff as well, because they've not got the support structure behind them, which is why I much prefer what Brett advocates, which is a smaller number of front-facing advisors with a big support team underneath them, again, to emulate that on the distribution side, because it makes a lot of sense. You can't be everything to everyone. You've got to prioritize, and if people have their specialties, I'm not necessarily great at admin. And so that stuff falls by the wayside, as much as it's still a very, very important part of the distribution process. So I agree with what you're saying. I think it would be great to see more people move to that, because it then answers the question you said earlier about the academy and bringing people through. It kind of solves it, but the reality is very difficult when you do have big targets and revenue targets to hit on top of that.
And the fine profit margins.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the other things as well that I was going to mention when you said about how the market's sort of evolved over the last sort of few years, obviously with, AI tools. And I think hopefully, a lot of the technology that's available now will do some of the heavy lifting for BDMs and advisors, and sort of release them to do what they're good at doing, which is going out and talking to their clients. So it shouldn't always be kind of feared, because I think initially we're like, oh no, this can do. But I do think it will probably, do away with a certain level of grade within an organization. And that's just, I think, the reality of new improvements, new technology that's going to be available. So, But yeah, fast forward a couple of years, then hopefully that should, like I say, free them up so that you're able to have better conversations and you don't have to have that admin burden kind of lingering over you, which is a downside of being successful, isn't it? You're always going to have stuff that you need to sort out support-wise.
And when you're placing BDMs then, so we've spoke about what makes a really good BDM. Where do BDMs or sales professionals fall short? Is it something they're not doing, or something that they are doing but sort of unconsciously that means that they're not making the grade?
I mean, I think if I was to start it by what makes a good BDM, and then obviously you could sort of flip it, and obviously ultimately if you're not doing it, that you're going to be not a very good BDM, I suppose. But I mean, I asked the question. We did the again with the benchmark report, and I asked the 10 people that had received the most nominations. This is like probably going back three years or so. Why they felt that they'd received the most nominations, what made them sort of good enough to get all these nominations from advisors, and then after I kind of compiled the results, it was they sort of everything that they were saying fell into 5 categories. And it all, again, links in. So the first one was reliability, and reliability equals trust, do the basics brilliantly. And advisors do understand that BDMs are very, very busy, but they also expect them to, return a phone call in a promptly time, respond to an email. If there's a query there, just act on it, get it sorted. So again, do the basics brilliantly, understanding the advisor's business, which we talked about, be more consultative. Don't always go in there leading with a product, again, which we've discussed. We talked about the distribution structure as, again, obviously, the BDM, you can, regardless of how good you are, the structure's the structure ultimately. And also as well, the face-to-face contact. And someone said, find a reason, find an excuse to go and see them. Just pop in, just take them a report, take them, especially now with AI, ChatGPT, if there is some, with a budget, it can just spit out a couple of pages of text that you could just sort of print off or send it to your marketing person to say, look, make this look nice. And then just, again, just drop it off to one of your advisors or a few of your advisors, just be as proactive as you can be. And I think also as well, it's activity, ultimately, if the activity levels are low, and especially with working from home, the temptation is actually, do you know what? I'm not going to pick up the phone. I'm not going to pat my diary now. And again, it's a fine balance. I don't particularly advocate heads of distribution looking over BDM shoulders to see what they've got going on. But you should almost be doing that. You should be informing your boss about how busy and what you've got going on. And then just kind of know how successful you're going to be, on the back of that. If you have so many calls over a period of, however many weeks, then ultimately that's going to lead to hopefully some business queries coming through at the other end.
You've placed lots of people over the last 25 years, and there are some companies that see a down cycle in terms of favourability and staff leave and there's turnover and that kind of thing. But there are some companies that seem to retain their staff really well. And there are companies that I can think of, Transact, where you speak to the majority of their people and they've been there for 10, 15 years plus. There are lots of other examples. How do these companies keep their staff and make them happy, even when there's all of this change going on in the profession? What is it that keeps people where they are?
Yeah, again, very, very good question.
Don't give them too many tips. You'll be out of the job.
I know. Well, and it's because whenever I do speak to somebody, and I'll always sort of structure the call by saying, "Oh, hi, Gareth," and I just imagine them rolling their eyes. All right, okay, it's him again. And
it's the same for us with advisors, don't worry.
Right, yeah. So you can relate to that. And it's one of those where I'm sort of saying, look, I don't want you to be 100% unhappy in order to explore your opportunities. You shouldn't really wait until you're at that point. It's from mine, it's just checking in with people, and through no fault of their own, the boss might change, who's amazing, and they get, excuse my French, an arsehole that they have to report into, who's a micromanager, or the proposition isn't good enough anymore, and it's not fit for purpose. So there's so many kind of variables that can happen, like target increases and so on and so forth, and might get bought out, might go, for sale. So again, my job is just to keep in touch with people and to say, look, when your circumstances, if they change in between our next call, just give me a shout and we'll have a conversation. But I would just say how firms retain good BDMs. I've called this the happiness rating, and actually, you probably heard about it. I don't know if you saw the thing I put on LinkedIn a year or so ago. I call it the 6 Ps, as to a really good objective way just to sort of think, actually, do you know what, is the grass greener, or am I quite happy where I am? And the areas are, so panel, obviously, it's do you have good accounts? Are they local? Can you generate good levels of business from them, or is it sort of a dog end area where actually it should be looked after by a telephone account manager? The proposition, of course, you're only as good as the products you're going to be selling. Is it competitive? Are the performance levels good? Are the pricing, where it needs to be? The people, we touched on it with your boss. Have you got a nice person to report into? What are your colleagues like? What's the culture like? The package, very, very important. Are you paid a fair salary? You don't have to be paid the top salary in the marketplace, but you need to be at that level where it's like, okay, well, I'm mid-range. I'm comfortable with that. I've got some flexibility. So if I I keep doing what I'm doing, then hopefully it's only going to go one way and increases on basics that way. The performance scheme, so the bonuses, again, a huge one. And that can change very, very quickly if there's a new CEO who comes in and goes, actually, do you know what, this quarterly formulaic scheme that, we're paying some ridiculous amounts of money here, I'm going to change it. We're going to be purely, discretionary, whereby, they all go into kind of bonuses and not knowing anything about what they're going to get. And there are companies out there that are like that. There's one particular company I won't mention, but they literally do not know up until 2 weeks before the money hits their account what they're going to get for the previous business year. So for me, there's a lot, there's some good schemes and there's some not so good schemes. And then lastly, it's the progression. And I'm not talking about kind of, business development directors or managers who want to be in the role until they call it a day. But this is kind of progression of people who think, okay, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to become a player manager or to get involved in leadership, or do I want to get into, strategic accounts? What's kind of the next step for me? And also as well, you can kind of take a view on the company that you're working for. If it is a PE-backed organization, if they got a 5-year plan, do you think that maybe if they are on the acquisition trail, if they're going to be taking over a competitor, are the two regions going to be kind of, a bit crowded? Are you going to become, at risk of redundancy? So there's a few variables there. So that's from the objective side, and very quickly on the subjective side. And when I asked the question in the BDM Life report, I'm sure you saw it. It was, what's important to you? Obviously, other than the financials, it was the top two from BDMs were doing the best job for the financial advisors. And also as well, it was, having respect and having the recognition for a job well done. And that to me is the easiest thing that any head of sales can do, just to send an email to say, do you know what, you've smashed it last quarter. Well done. Amazing. Here's a case of wine or something like that. It costs them next to nothing, but it means a lot to the person, who receives it, I think.
And it's the engine room of any provider, isn't it? Like you say, without blowing smoke up every sales team, without distribution, no one wins.
It's going to fall down, isn't it, ultimately?
I mean, that's it. I mean, it's been so insightful having you in. I think our audience are going to find it so useful to hear it from you with all the experience and all the feedback to back it up. If you wanted to leave our audience, the sales team at home who are watching this, with one piece of advice, what would you tell them?
I think, for me being here, I'm in my late 40s now. And I think when you're starting off in your career, you might have that sort of imposter syndrome to think, well, I don't really have the right to have an opinion on LinkedIn or something like that. But that doesn't really leave you. I'm in my late 40s and I still get it. And you sort of think, actually, people love, I think, to look at people who do give it a go and try and try and do it for the right reasons and have the right motivation. So I think, work hard, try and just improve your personal brand as best you can do. Just try and be a nice person to your colleagues and your advisors. Go above and beyond, go the extra mile, professional development, seek a mentor, and just keep going. It's hard. It's tough out there. And sometimes, especially when you're working on your own, like I am, sometimes you can take it quite personally, but you shouldn't do. It's just people have kind of the blinkers on and they're doing what they do to get through their day and their week and their year. And people have so much to deal with, but just keep going and do it in the right way. And you should be successful.
Great. Gareth, we've had an absolute blast having you on. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.